Yes, things can dictate making something on the continuum of good or bad worse for you versus better for you in the current state, but that doesn't mean the avoidance is the answer, right? Like avoidance is never the answer with most things, right? If anything, that is the sign. Like pain is one of the best teachers that life can give us. All right, episode 51 of Pursuit of Balance. We are going to talk about working through injuries. We're going to talk about fascia. We're going to talk about functional training. So we're going to kind of mix a few different conversations and topics, I guess, into this conversation. This is something that just stemmed from a personal thing myself. Like, tweaked my back a little bit a couple weeks ago, and I've had to make some accommodations to training, and just like, I mean, there's a handful of things that went into it, which I'm going to talk about today. For those that don't know, I'm sure most of you probably heard me if you've been listening to my stuff long enough that I had a serious back injury, when I was 20, from a CrossFit injury. It was kind of a mix of a couple things. Like I got rear-ended when I was 19, rolled the car over twice, and I had a little bit of a back issue from that. I never felt like it was a big deal. Who knows? Probably a bigger deal than I should have given it credit for. Then I had a CrossFit injury throughout a deadlift and a box jump workout where I just felt like that lightning bolt. And I was like, oh, that did not feel good. Whatever. Went through my rehab. Back felt good. I go through phases of back feels great for months, sometimes even years. And then I go through phases where I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I just feel like nothing works. Everything's bothering me. I started golfing during the pandemic, and that just, I was really good prior to the pandemic for like how my back felt with training, squatting, deadlifting, those heavier lifts. Like I've kind of naturally been someone that outside of the CrossFit and kind of Olympic lifting phase of life, like I've never really been a huge proponent of like lifting really, really heavy for me. I just think from the longevity side, like I personally, out of the hierarchy of like health, aesthetics, and performance, like now that I don't compete in something, I would say performance is number 3. Not that I don't care about it, but like I care more about like how I look, but most importantly, just like my health of how I feel. But obviously there's a thing called an ego that I'm not that great as talking it down sometimes. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. So I was through my back injury and my journey over the last 15 years now, I've realized that the things that I'm most sensitive to is deep squats, right? So if I'm doing a barbell back squat, I feel fine with front squats. I feel better with low bar versus high bar. I feel better if I'm heel raised. So obviously positioning and mobility dictates a lot of this conversation, which I'll touch on. Deadlifts, I don't really care for heavy conventional as much as sumo. I can just get into a better position where I can get a little bit more stable. So those are movements that I kind of just like moved off the list as like as far as a priority for me. And I know that they're probably some of the favorite lifts from most people in our gym and most people in gyms, period, because they're just fun. It's like it's a movement that you can move a lot of weight and you can get strung on very fast if you're kind of programming it correctly. But for me, as far as the need and carryover, like, especially when I was doing men's physique, I wasn't doing much of the heavy barbell bilateral, kind of movements just because like I wanted a baby waist for those kind of things. So like in CrossFit, it was different. I was training for performance. When I moved back over to men's physique and that style of training, I kind of removed that and I kind of became more isolated with some of the kind of exercise choices that an exercise selection I was going through. So over the years, like I know a lot of people in functional lifestyles love the back squats and deadlifts and things like that, even barbell bench press. For me, those big 3, I really don't care about personally. I just feel like there's not enough ROI. I'd rather do a dumbbell bench press instead of a barbell. I'd rather do a Bulgarian split squat or a goblet or a front squat versus a back squat barbell. I'd rather do a sumo versus a conventional deadlift. I'd rather do a trap bar versus conventional. So like there's little swaps. I kind of made some posts on this a few weeks ago on Instagram. And I'll probably share some of that today too. So whatever, I was doing some back squats for the first time in probably 6 months. And, the typical thing of like, I was like, oh, I feel good. Started off with a plate, went to 185, felt good. Went to 225, felt good. Added a little bit more weight. And I felt fine during it, which is where some of us get in trouble. But the fact that I haven't done it in a while, I kind of I think, too close to what I was used to doing like 6 months prior without doing any back squats. I should have been a little bit more mindful of my loading kind of on getting back into it, especially because it was my first session. And I just felt like back squatting, right? Next day I go on a run and like, as I'm finishing up the run, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I was like, my back is starting to get tight. Not like, oh, I got the lightning bolt, something's wrong, but like, I'm starting to get tight. And then it just got progressive work. In the last 2 weeks, and also another disclaimer, I've been building a nursery for the last 2 weeks at home. So I've been spending a lot of time sitting on the ground, sitting on my knees, sitting in a squat, screwing things in, picking up heavy things, moving things into storage, dressers, armoires, cribs, rugs. So I've been doing a lot of things that really just has not given my back the most time to really recover as well, which I'm sure is obviously a level of that. But what I want to make this episode a little bit more valuable for everyone else is I still to this day get a lot of people that think that there's a need to stop training or quit training when there's an injury, right? And one of my biggest rifts with the healthcare system and doctors, so if anybody's a doctor listening to this, I have a little bit of a bone pick to pick. I will never agree that removing exercise or stop exercising completely, and when I say I don't like the word never, so let me take that back. For 95% of issues, I will not agree with the decision to say stop training, right? Because there are so many different ways that we can continually move. There are so many different regressions that we can make with certain movements to continually train the same pattern. And there's so many different body parts that are not injured that we can still train. And when I think about recovery and like fascia, right? So I want to talk about fascia a little bit because I touched on this in the beginning, and I almost was going to make the whole episode about fascia. Um, I do have somebody coming onto the podcast, hopefully within the month, where she'll be able to talk a lot more about this because she's gone through all of Thomas Myers stuff. So there's a guy, the author of the book is Thomas Myers, and he's the guy that obviously does all this stuff. But it's called Anatomy Trains, right? And he talks about that. So fascia, for those that don't know, is this connective tissue that holds the entire body together, right? And it creates these different meridians around the body, right? Meaning that like there's in a sense, these like highways that connect the body. So there's like a superficial back line. There's a superficial front line. There's lateral lines. There's the rotational transverse lines, the functional lines, which would be things like sports or swinging or punching or running. Then you have the deep front lines, anterior, deep posterior. So you have like these different fascial lines, right? But fascia does have a lot of nerves, right? It does have a lot of capacity to restrict mobility, right? Or restrict the way we move, or obviously improve it on the opposite side. And it's one of those things that's really, really sensitive. Well, two things. It's sensitive to two things. Number one is hydration. So if anybody's felt stiff on a good like hangover after going out, or feel like they're like dehydrated from heat and they just wake up a little bit stiffer, that's the fascia. That's the connective tissue not being able to glide. Like one of the things when I was looking up as I was doing some research on this episode, and the analogy or example it gave me is like if you ever looked at like a ketchup bottle, right? If you never shaked a ketchup bottle before and it looks like all this just water comes out of it, it's kind of gross as I say it. It almost gets like jelly and clumped up together. So that's why we need to shake it together, right? That was kind of the example of what they were saying is like when the fascia and tissue is very hydrated, it has the ability to glide really well. And you think about muscle contraction, it is this gliding surface on the muscle, right? And fascia is both a visceral thing and it is a very superficial thing to the outside, right? So we want to have proper hydration for the fascia so we can move well. Number two is fascia is always very sensitive to the positions that we spend time in. If I spend all my time in a chair, that fascia over time is going to be a little bit stiffer and more restricted to the ranges that you expose it to. So how do I improve the way someone's movement capacity looks? Getting them to move more through a full range of motion. So fascia does have a lot of kind of impact on mobility and impact on injury. So that is something I kind of wanted to touch on, and I'll keep kind of touching on it as we go. But the big focus for me on this episode was like understanding that injuries are, I would say for me, a bigger mental setback than they are a physical setback. Like yesterday when I was like working out and I was kind of going through it, and I just like was doing Cossack squats with a deload workout. And I was like, oh, my back's not really loving this right now. So I like dropped the weights and I was like, let's just do this body weight. But I remember just being kind of like in a mood. I was just like, oh, like it's annoying when I'm injured or I'm annoying when I'm not feeling 100. And especially, like I used to say this a lot when I was in my early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s, now I'm in my mid 30s, that like you shouldn't feel like this. But like one of the best things about training is feeling good, right? And feeling good can come from how you perform, your strength, your speed, your mobility. It can come from how you look and the confidence you have about yourself on the build that you've created for yourself or your body composition, etc. But also, it's like most importantly is being able to move well pain free. Like I want to be able to keep up with my kids and in the future keep up with my grandkids. I want to be able to, when we do these sporting member outings in the middle of the summer, I want to be able to do that for as long as I can in my life. Like I want to be able to go play golf. I want to be able to go surf. I want to be able to mountain bike. I want to be able to play pickup basketball if anybody asks me. Like having your body be functional and having the empowerments of being able to move pain free is something that we take for granted until we run into an injury. And injuries are just a part of life. If anybody's active through sports, active through training, I would love to sit here and tell you that like functional training is going to guarantee that you'll never have an injury, but that's a lie. If anybody tells you that, they're just selling you a lie. Like it's a byproduct that's going to happen through movement, and it happens every once in a while. But the goal is, how do I reduce risk and how do I increase the resilience that my body has so I can at least limit the amount of times or the severity of an injury based off my movement capacity through strength, mobility, et cetera, whatever it might be. So for me, I'll give you guys an example. My back, my posture is somebody that's stuck in extension, right? So if you were to look at my posture, I'm in an anterior shift, meaning my body, kind of my body weight's a little bit shifted forward. So if you were to look at me from the side, my hips look like they're shifted forward a tad. I'm also on a bit of an anterior tilt. So not only am my pelvis shifted forward, but it's also tilted forward a little bit. So if you think about this, if you're somebody that has the ability to do so, if you were to stand up, push your hips forward and arch your back a little bit, you feel how your lower back gets tight, right? You feel how your hamstrings get a little tight. You feel then that basically is your hip flexor shortening and your erector, your lower back shortening. Hamstring is going to get tight via length. And then your core, the other side, is going to be stuck in a long position too. Now, that relationship of that posture also generally leads to my rib cage sticking out. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you'll see my hands. If not, you just have to bear with me. Hips shifted forward, rib cage tilted back, right? So basically, like, I'm in extension, right? Where both things are kind of poking out. I call this my rib boobs. I can tell based off someone's posture, how they breathe, or their level of stress, or how they're going to move, right? Based off a mobility screen, right? And here's what I mean by that. I'll give you my example. When you do an inhale, I want everyone to do this with me. Take a big breath in. You feel how your body starts to arch its back, your chest gets big, your arms kind of start to rotate out. So when you think about inhale, right? So inhalation is generally connected to getting into extension, getting into external rotation, and getting into abduction. So if I'm trying to improve those ranges of motion when I'm doing a stretch or mobility drill with somebody, I'm going to prioritize doing a big ass inhale, more inhalation. Now I want you guys to do a long exhale. You feel your body kind of, your back starts to flatten, the ribs start to drop, the hips start to tilt back, the arms start to internally rotate. So exhalation is generally synergistic to flexion, internal rotation, and a deduction. So if I am trying to improve those ranges, I'm putting a huge emphasis on exhale. Now let's go a step further. If I am somebody that is more stressed or I'm a more sympathetic state, parasympathetic is rest and digest, sympathetic is fight or flight. When I inhale, big breath in, that is a more sympathetic breath, right? So big inhales are generally a sign of somebody being in a more sympathetic state, right? So if I have huge inhales and shallow exhales, generally is going to lead to a posture that's more extended, externally rotated, and abducted, right? And it's also going to show us that there may be more in a posture showing fight or flight. If I look at somebody that has the ability to do a long, and like this is called the bolt test, where you can do like how long is your inhale versus how long is your exhale. The longest inhale you can do and the longest exhale you can do. Generally, somebody that has a longer exhale, you're going to see that their posture is a bit more flexed, a bit more internally rotated, a bit more adducted. And there's not a wrong or right. This is on a continuum. It's finding the balance for your body and your kind of mobility that's going to dictate some of these things that I'm going to coach on. So that was a very long-winded way to kind of show you that, like, right now you can, based off my posture, my example, I can tell you that my body is more sympathetic, right? I'm naturally a more fight or flight person. If you were to look at, like, on the continuum of sympathetic and parasympathetic, my body is more, I'm type A. I'm on the sympathetic side, naturally just more. What that does to affect my posture is that keeps me stuck in extension, right? So that keeps my lower back stuck in a little bit more of an extended position. It keeps my hamstrings kind of locked eccentrically in a longer position. It keeps my hip flexors locked in a shorter position. So when I have to do my mobility drills and my recovery, I need to do things to get me back into this parasympathetic. So I need to prioritize recovery. I need to prioritize walking. I need to prioritize things that shift my weight backwards. I need to prioritize things that get my hips to posteriorly tuck, glutes, core, right? So when I look at these injuries, I like to look at number one is the position that that person in, the posture that person's in, the breathing that that person's in, the lifestyle, the stress that they're in, because all those things will dictate a lot of things. But like I said, I want to make the episode prioritized around, hey, if I have an injury, are there things that I can still do to move forward? And the answer is hell yeah. So I'll give you my context and I will try to do my best to just give you other examples for maybe injuries that you're currently dealing with. I have a lower back issue that when I have a flare up, bending over and flexion, so rounding of my back is very sensitive for me. Deep squatting, very sensitive for me, right? We actually had this as it was a brief discussion when we were going over workouts last week in the Palo Alto team meeting. And one of the coaches was like, I was like, hey, we need to go over high bar, we need to go over low bar, right? When I was breaking down the exercise. And this coach was like, well, I think like I don't even break down low bar. We should just do high bar only because like I think the goal is to get everyone to be able to move through a full range of motion. And I was like, okay, yes and no. Here's my argument. Yes, I agree with you that everyone should have the ability to squat, right? Yes, I would love the coaching and the intention to be able to get someone to improve the range of motion where their ankles get better, their knees get better, their hips get better, their thoracic extension gets better, shoulder joint gets better, so they can actually do a more upright back squat and still get full range of motion up and down. But the context lies on number one, body type. I have a very long femur, so I actually feel mechanically in a better position and more stable when I'm in a low bar versus high bar, unless I have my heels raised or I'm in an Olympic lifting shoe. So I will shift forward if I'm in a high bar or my range of motion would shorten. Number two is my mobility is different than everyone else's mobility. So like if you want an easy test, if you were to stand up and lift one knee as high as you can go with your own strength, right? Meaning you're not hugging your leg, you're just bringing it up as high as you can. That is the active range of motion that that hip joint has access to. So if I were to basically take a picture, like whatever degree of range of motion that is with a straight back, that's your active range of motion. There's a point in a squat where I go below my active range of motion and then my hips get tucked under and my back rounds. We've all seen this where someone's back looks really round at the bottom of a squat. That's them squatting past the point of their active hip mobility, right? And I use the word active hip mobility, even though mobility is only active. Flexibility is more passive. So that's where some of the context lies is like your body type, your mobility levels are different than everyone else. And then also the most important thing for the sake of this episode is the previous medical history or injuries, right? Is like if my back is sensitive to flexion under load, then doing something like a deadlift from the floor with a little bit of a round back is not ideal for me. Doing a Jefferson curl is not ideal for me right now. Doing a deep squat, my back around it with load on my back, it's not ideal for me. And the ROI for it is like slim to none. Like, what am I doing besides my ego feeling a little bit better that I can do these movements? Now, what I do want to remind people of is I don't believe, as I've gotten more matured and older in my career, that there's not necessarily bad positions, there's weak positions. So, me squatting on the back squat, obviously, weight is subjective. You know, a lot of coaches will laugh at the weight that I use for back squat compared to them. But for me, it's like when I get to that level or whatever weight for you, you get to a weight where it's like, wow, this feels like a 7 out of 10, an 8 out of 10, a 9 out of 10 on the weight. Like when you get to that level of RPE, you know, there's going to be some compensations that get made past a certain like threshold, right? There's going to be like, oh, my backgrounds where I shifted to one side a little bit more, you know, like I shifted my bar forward a little bit. Like, you know, you're losing some of the stability with big movements like a deadlift, big movements like a bench press, big movements like a back squat or any type of squat. One of the most important things to remember is like there's a degree of mobility that's needed, yes, but there's also a huge demand for stability. The more stable you can get yourself into a position, the more energy you can transfer, meaning that the stronger you can get because you can transfer more force through the floor, right? Or through the bench or through the bar, whatever it might be. So when it comes to injuries, one of the most important things to remember with that statement is like our body is always looking to create as much stability as possible. So if you are injured and you're sensitive to certain ranges or certain position, your body's going to become stiffer in order to accommodate for that. Give you an example. My hips become a little bit tighter after a back flare up. Why? Because my body is basically trying to prevent me from going through ranges of motion that I know I do not have the strength for yet, or that no, I don't have the active mobility for yet. So when it comes to training, I want to think about is how do I continually move forward with my training? My back hurts with a back squat or a deadlift right now. Does that mean I can't deadlift? Maybe for the time being. Maybe I reduce my load, right? Here's a good example for everyone. If you're able to get into a position with no weight without pain, then the position of or the movement is not the problem, the loading is. So meaning if I go over and I touch my toes and my back doesn't hurt and I can do that a million times a day, rounding my back is not the end of the world. If I do that and I hold a barbell in my hand and around my back and it hurts, that means it's a loading issue. I can't handle a 45-pound bar going into spinal flexion with my lumbar, right? So that would be an example of, okay, there's a gap between strength of where I am unloaded and where I am unloaded or loaded. So let's reduce the load, or let's reduce the volume, sets of reps or tempos, whatever that might be, right? Let's work on having a little bit more control by adding tempo and then just stay there, right? And this is where the biggest thing that most people can get in trouble with injuries and recovering from injuries is the thing between your ears. There's this ego that you know what you are capable of. And this is even more so for the demographic of people that have done this in the past. The people that have played sports or have been a certain strength or have been a certain speed, and then you take time off or get injured or whatever happens in life, and then suddenly you go back to it and like, I know what I can do. I know what I'm capable of. Versus the demographic of people that's like, I've never done this and I just started my 40s. Like they're generally better at, like, if anything, they deal with a little bit more fear of even knowing what they're capable of. But I would say for the injury side, I would rather work with that person and empower them to understand and build that confidence through that versus the person that's always running themselves into the wall and then running into injury after injury after injury, like myself. So to give you guys the back squat story, is back squats and what I did, back squats and running, the end of the world for me? No. Am I going to avoid back squats the rest of my life? No. Am I going to avoid running for the rest of the life? Hell no. Are those things harder on the back if I don't have the mobility? Yes. Are those things harder on the back if you don't have the strength or stability? Yes. Are those things harder on the body if you don't have the posture for it or you're not in the correct position? Yes. So think about that context, that yes, things can dictate making something on the continuum of good or bad worse for you versus better for you in the current state. But that doesn't mean the avoidance is the answer, right? Like avoidance is never the answer with most things, right? If anything, that is the sign. Like pain is one of the best teachers that life can give us because pain is basically telling you, hey, dumbass, you can't handle this yet, right? I use yet as a very empowering word because I can back squat, but maybe because I haven't been back squatting at all the last few years. Like since golf, I've reduced my back squats probably more so than ever because I just knew like it doesn't have carryover for me. Like I can still train my legs with a Bulgarian split squat and kill my legs and get a good leg workout. And it doesn't make me feel any type of way, right? It doesn't affect my back with golfing, right? It doesn't affect my back with going to ride a bike or going surfing or skimboarding. And like those are things that I personally with my life want to be able to still do. You know, it's funny with the fitness competition, like I would say, well, there's a few of us that don't compete, but there's a handful of coaches in functional lifestyles that are, I mean, just freaks of nature, super strong, super fast, super impressive on so many different levels. And I have the conversation like, well, when are you going to do a competition? Like right now, I just don't have the gear. Like for me, like I don't have the motivation about competing in fitness at the current state of life. I don't know if we'll change in the future or if it never will, but I do have the motivation of I want to use my fitness to be better at the things I do outside, right? So yes, fitness is a big driver for longevity and health, how I feel. More importantly for me, how I look is super important for me. I'll always be, I don't know what the word of that, superficial in that sense. Some people don't like to say it. I like looking good. And for me, body type is really important. But the performance is like, can I golf? If it affects my golf in a negative way, then I'm going to change things. Maybe reduce it, maybe, but maybe just more importantly, change the volume or change the structure of the organization of the workout. If it affects my ability to go surf or skimboard or mountain bike or, you know, do things that I do outside of the gym, then yeah, like those are things that don't have ROI for me. They're just high risk, low ROI. And I'm like, for me, it's like that's just how my brain works. It's like if that's a high risk exercise and a low return on my investment, what am I doing it for? Besides my ego, besides trying to keep up with everyone else. So back squats, what I should have done. What was the lesson learned here? I should have done a lot lighter of weight. Maybe I should have spent a little bit more time with mobility and cooling down and getting myself in better positions because if I'm stuck in extension, back squats is a very extension based movement. If I'm tight upstairs in my chest, shoulders, and thoracic spine, then when I go to get a bar and unrack, I'm already overextended. I have to arch my back to get there. And if I go to squat and I'm already in an anterior tilt, that's like you arching your back and then squatting. You're going to run out of range of motion a lot faster and you're going to immediately dump into this flexion. So there was a handful of things that I'm like, okay, I should have just, if I wanted a back squat, I should have done it lighter. If I wanted to go heavier, I should have either built up a lot more volume and repetition for the best squatters in the world. Let's think about a power lifter here. Let's think about an Olympic lifter. Let's think about a CrossFit athlete. The people that would need squatting, maybe even sports, but that would even change, I think, very dramatically compared to the other examples. Powerlifting, Olympic lifters, those guys or girls are squatting multiple times a week. So their mobility is adapted to squat well. Their stability is adapted to squat well. Their strength, obviously, is going to be much better than most people in general population. If you're squatting once a week, once a month, once a quarter, you're not in the position or adapted to that position yet to go really, really heavy, especially for someone like myself or anybody listening to this that's susceptible to that injury. If you're more resilient, I would hate to say this is like a fear statement, but for some of us, it could just be a ticking time bomb because all it takes is one fuck up. It takes one day where you kind of strained yourself a little bit too hard, went a little too heavy, went a little bit too low on a range of motion that didn't have control. And then the next day you throw your shoes on and suddenly, bam, you know, like you do. That's what you deal with. That's how I hurt my back. So that's why it resonates. But to kind of wrap up this conversation, the biggest thing that I want to just remind people, if you have a knee injury, you have a back injury, you have a foot injury, you have a shin splints or, you know, plantar fasciitis from running injury, shoulders, elbows, the first and foremost thing to think about is there's always different body parts. If I have to take some time off of doing hinge-based exercises until I feel a little recovered, great. I'll do lunges. I'll do goblet squats. I'll do things that can get me in a better position that maybe are more stable, right? That's fine. And then when I do reintroduce it, when I get back to a place, don't be an idiot, is what I would tell myself. And I would reduce the load. I would reduce the amount of reps or sets that I do, and I would add frequency back, right? So maybe instead of doing a lot once a week or a lot once every other week, I would do maybe a little bit twice a week. I would microdose that way back, right? And then the other thing is like, understand that there's so many other body parts, right? Like if my left shoulder hurts on dips and maybe it bothers me a little bit with a barbell bench press, I'm like, okay, but I feel okay with chest flies. I feel okay with the dumbbell press light enough. Listen to your body. Do the things that don't hurt, right? Or do shoulders instead of chest for some time. Do some isolated things, like do more body weight. You always want to make sure that you're picking the path that has the least amount of pain because that's where you're obviously going to get into trouble. Is like regress the volume, regress the weights, regress the amount of time that's needed recovery. Add more time to spend more time on your recovery stuff. So that's your cool down stretches, that's spending more time with your warm-ups. You got to remember, tissue is very sensitive to temperature as well. So that kind of fascia example is, yes, it's very sensitive to both hydration and position, but it's also very sensitive to temperature, right? We all know people that are like skipped a warm-up and then go right into something like, oh, I kind of tweaked my back right now. Versus like, why do I spend a little bit more time more than normal? And like there's Kelly Starrett says this in his book, like Supple Leopard, for those that don't know, that's his book. His kind of philosophy was like, you should be able to just wake up and go on a run. You should be able to wake up and go do these things and deadlift heavy, right? And I would say yes and no. Here's my argument to this. Yes, if I was an animal and I was a leopard that laid on the floor, slept on the floor, laid on a tree, walked around all day, the modern day human sits in a chair, sits in a soft chair, sits in a soft couch, lays in a soft bed, doesn't do mobility, doesn't move, takes 2,000, 3,000 steps. Like it's different. You know, so you need to remember that like our diets are different, our inflammation levels are different, our toxin levels are different, our movement patterns are different. So like I see the argument and where that could be pushed, but I do like to just remind people like that context of like those primal examples, I think could be a little bit miscued sometimes is basically the way that I would say it. So like I said, no matter what, if you are dealing with an injury, a strain, mild, intense, it doesn't matter what it is, remind yourself that push back on the doctors for those, and also for those that just even do this without a doctor's note. Oh, let me take time off of workouts. I'm going to take a week off, 2 weeks off, a month off. You don't need to take any time off. We will regress whatever you need to if you're coming to Functional Lifestyles. For someone that's not at Functional Lifestyles listening to this, regress your workouts, change the volume, change the exercise selection, avoid the body part if you need to, still move, do more body weight. Like there's a million and one things that you can do. And that keeps the consistency of the habit of you doing something moving forward versus you just completely taking time off and then ruining a bunch of things downstream. Because now I'm falling out of the habit of working out. My diet's going to fall apart and it's just boom, 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 boom. Right? It's a lot of things that fall soon. All right, guys. Well, that was my ramble episode of injuries, fascia, regressions, whatever I talked about. I have no idea what I'm even going to call that one, but I hope you guys got a little bit of nugget and some value to that one. I'll see everyone next week.